We have a short recorded message from Julius on assistive technology and education. Julius?
This is Julius Mbura. He has a black curly hair, he's wearing a grey striped shirt, and he's talking to you.
Hello everyone. My name is Julius Mbura. I'm a lawyer, an advocate for disability rights. I work at inABLE under the advocacy wing as the advocacy officer and legal officer. I am from Kenya. I am a VIP, visually impaired person, and I'm known for reviewing cars by touch and feel. I'm a risk taker and a lover of life. I strive to live a heart-centered life and to shift perception of people on disability. I wasn't born blind. I have lost my sight twice now. The first time it came when I was 10 years. The second time it was 2019. Assistive technology to me is empowerment. It's the road to freedom for a person living with disability. And it's what I attribute my success to. It's the reason why I'm independent. I work and carry out my errands without needing help. It's my technological lens. I came to the realization that my disability is not my limitation. When I got to university and I got to interact with people from diverse backgrounds, this is where I had to really work on my inner self and come to terms with the fact that I'm in this situation, but that won't be a stumbling block. Using assistive technology actually from a young age would expose these blind and visually impaired kids to actually go beyond what they know, get them to know that they are more capable and they are more they're more independent in their own ways, and they can dream for whatever they want. We are in a digital era, and it's the highest time we got digital accessibility being embedded in everything that is supposed to help bring inclusion, from the policy level to actually the implementation phase, where we go to the grassroots and get children who've been hidden by their parents to take them to school, and to also put measures in place where children with disability are not discriminated against. I say I'm privileged to have gotten into best of both worlds, the sighted world and the blind universe, as I call it. We are the new blind, and you know what? If I can't see the sky, then why let it be my limit?
Thank you, Julius, for sharing your story with us today. Your experiences, no doubt, help us to learn and better understand why it is so vital to get better at digital accessibility and, of course, the application of assistive technology. It now gives me the pleasure to welcome our first panel, and to help us understand matters education, I'll introduce Deepti Raja, the Social Development Specialist at the World Bank, who is moderating the discussion. Over to you, Deepti.
Welcome to the education session of the Inclusive Africa Conference 2021. I am a brown South Asian woman in my early 40s with black hair and brown eyes, wearing a blue shirt with small black designs. I work as a social development specialist at the World Bank, and it is really my pleasure to moderate and host this wonderful panel today. Before I start introducing our panel, let me just offer a bit of context for our session today. Assistive and accessible technologies, as we have heard from so many of our keynote speakers, can be catalytic tools in realizing the right to education for children with disabilities by advancing both educational access and learning outcomes. However, the potential of technology to improve educational outcomes does not automatically translate to changes on the ground, and much depends on the larger ecosystem. And and the people. Over the last year and a half, COVID-19 has served as a real-world stress test of how technology fared in ensuring continuity of education for children with disabilities. And this gives us an opportunity to learn from these experiences, to identify successes that can be scaled and invest in bridging gaps. We have an excellent panel here today to reflect on some of these issues. Without further ado, let me introduce them. We have Dr. Fred Haga, Director of Special Needs Education from the Ministry of Education, Kenya. We have Lizzie Kamukwamba Kapansa, who's a lecturer at the Zambia Institute of Special Education, and Ronald Kasule is co-founder and CEO of a social enterprise, Dasuns, in Uganda. I am also going to request everyone to please mute their microphone. Let me also talk a bit about the format of the session. I am going to open the panel by throwing a question to each of our panelists, just to help them frame the context and talk to us about their experiences and insights. And then we invite all of the audience to send us their questions so that the panelists could respond to those as well. So please start by putting in your questions in the Q&A box. All right, getting started with the panel now. Fred, COVID brought about a rapid shift to remote learning, which had advantages and disadvantages for learners with disabilities. How do we take the positive learnings from remote learning forward when we return to so-called new normal? Thank you. Over to you, Fred.
Thank you so much. Good morning to everybody. It's nice to be participating in this second inclusive conference. You are right. When COVID struck last year, one of the most important lessons that all stakeholders got to learn was that children, especially learners with disabilities and other special needs, are very vulnerable because they found themselves at home without access to learning material and content, while their peers with disability were continuing to learn remotely. And they also found that their parents were not able to support them because many families have not quite interacted with the devices that are required to help these children learn. And we also found that most of the devices, even in schools, which had digital learning programs, were actually left. For a very long time, children with disabilities stayed at home and were left behind. That brought to the fore the issue of their vulnerability, and stakeholders had to think fast, be reminded of that very significant population. However, going forward, picking up on those lessons is important to learn that we need to plan inclusively, even as we intervene and implement our different education programs. We always need to remember that there is a significant population of learners that require a different approach, an inclusive approach when it comes to providing learning needs. Therefore, going forward, I think as stakeholders, ministries and other relevant organizations that are involved in the education of children with disabilities, it is critical that we get the role of assistive technology in the education of all learners, but especially learners with disabilities. And it is at this point that I call upon stakeholders strike a balance even in the budgeting process, because sometimes resources are channeled towards learning resources are not portable, are not reachable remotely, and sometimes these resources cost probably even more than some of the assist devices that would be required to reach to children. It's important, even as we provide devices, we think of how to ensure that they reach at the individual level learners with disabilities so that they can carry them home, they can go with them wherever they are, so that they are able to access. Secondly, it also calls upon ministries, governments, and organizations to think of how to ensure that all learners with disabilities have devices, but also have skills and have the content that is required. Most importantly, I think it is also important to note that the role of parents, especially in families which have children with disabilities, the role of families and parents and other siblings is also very key, because they should be able to have the kind of competence to support their children or their siblings with disabilities. Because up to now, many families have left that process of teaching and engagement to the schools. And some of them have not been able to learn some of the use of the assistive devices, or even things like braille, other different media, sign language, the proficiency required for learning, that they may be able to support the learners. I think while there were lots of advantages in terms of further marginalizing the population of learners with disability, those lessons are very important to be incorporated in the learning and implementation process, so that we ensure no learner is left behind.
Thank you so much, Fred. And I have to say, so many of the different levels of challenges or types of issues we need to factor in. And I particularly noted your focus on the fact that in ensuring that children with disabilities have access to the right supports, we really have to think about the parents and families, the household level, the individual level at which the services really need to be delivered. And it was, I found it very valuable to hear from you in terms of, sometimes how budgeting processes or the way systems are structured allow resources to be only maybe at schools or focusing on learning resources, and we aren't investing as much in systems and services at the individual level to make that successful. Thank you so much. And I think that actually takes us well to our next panelist. Ronald, what are some of the technology barriers that you would say that the deaf community face in Uganda during the pandemic? And how can we learn from that user experience? Over to you, Ronald.
Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity for me to address Africa this morning about the tech barriers faced by our colleagues, the deaf, during the COVID-19 pandemic. Like you say, my name is Ronald Kasule, CEO of Diversity Ability Support Network System. It is a tech startup that exploits the power of assistive technology to facilitate access to professional support services for persons with disabilities. I am a beneficiary of assistive technology myself. I am a person with disabilities in my early 40s, and I move around with the support of a power wheelchair. Without a power wheelchair, I feel so much disabled. And the reverse true, because I can make my errands on my own without pleading for anybody. So this summarizes the power of assistive technology Thank you so much, inABLE and all the supporters that have made this event a reality. Now back to the question. When World Health Organization, it was during March 2020, when the World Health Organization declared the outbreak of COVID-19 a pandemic. Millions of deaths from this strange disease have been reported since, and stringent measures have been taken to contain the spread of the responsible virus, which include the lockdowns, the closure of schools, workplaces, and pausing of all healthcare services deemed non-essential. This caused significant disruptions for people, not only in Uganda, but across the African continent and beyond. For persons with disabilities, including the deaf, these distractions only help to worsen the pre-existing marginalizations and exclusions, resulting into lower socioeconomic status. Specifically, talking about the deaf, the barriers faced in Uganda could be categorized into about 3 basic themes. We look at the technological barriers, we look at the inaccessible formats, and language or literacy barriers. We need to note that even before the outbreak of the pandemic, persons with hearing impairments have been struggling to cope within the poorly equipped socio-economic infrastructure that does not adequately respond to their support requirements. With the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, however, the situation has become more challenging for them, and they face their greatest isolation as a result of the counter-restrictive measures, which you call SOPs, while many others often fall victims under situations that have not been made understandable to them. Think about the social distance keeping procedure. It doesn't really consider people with deaf blindness who only communicate through tactile. And the available tech solutions have not yet advanced so far to address the needs of people with deaf blindness. Uganda, just as any other country across the globe, imposed the lockdown restrictions, thereby shifting from the physical to the virtual world, as my colleague has already put it. However, the virtual world is only accessible for people with required infrastructure in terms of the digital equipment and technologies, including computers, smartphones, internet connection, televisions, and others. Unfortunately, most of our deaf colleagues and persons with disabilities in general tend to fall on the wrong side of the digital world, with no means of access to such digital devices, let alone the literacy skills to effectively operate them. As the lockdown restrictions persist, access to information is paramount in terms of prevention and staying safe. In this way, government as well as other stakeholders have played a crucial role in providing, through radio, television, and internet-based platform, scientific information about COVID-19, including prevention and coping measures. Additionally, many educational institutions consider online learning platform a top priority for continued learning. However, you and I can ably imagine the situation of the deaf community under such circumstances. Even a few deaf colleagues who have access to these digital devices and virtual platform still find them less useful given the inaccessible audiovisual content shared through them. A review of COVID-19 press conferences and press briefings that has been conducted among 100 that has been conducted across the low middle income countries has found that about 64% of 123 low and middle income countries had sign language interpretation available. And none out of the 5 major international organizations, including the World Health Organization, provided sign language interpretation during their press briefings and conferences. Further, where efforts were made to provide sign language interpretation, interpreters were not always adequately trained. For deaf people who could not understand sign interpretation, providing captions is usually a crucial requirement to ensure information is accessible to a wider community. However, this is equally still a big challenge in Uganda as elsewhere in Africa. So, how can we learn from the user experience? We believe that disasters and emergencies like COVID-19 can sometimes act as a catalyst to drive forward progress in the aftermath. We need first to embrace the commitment to build back better and deliver to our promise to leave no one behind. I find that knowledge and experience sharing events such as this conference are very important to bring to fore the challenges faced by our different disability constituencies. We must aim to embrace universal design standards, but also strive to deliberately tap into user experience by working closely with people being left behind in order to understand their unique challenges. It is probably the main reason the disability rights movement believes that nothing is about us without us. Thank you very much for your audience.
Thank you so much, Ronald. And I do want to underscore some of the very important, significant points that you made. First of all, thank you for sharing your own experience as a user of assistive technology, and just again highlighting for our audience the absolute importance that we ensure that all persons with disabilities have access to the assistive technology that they need. I feel like some of the points that you mentioned are really crucial as you said, we think about building back better and really COVID-19 and the lessons as catalyst. And just beyond the challenges of ensuring that sign language interpretation is available in learning platforms, available through learning content, that content is accessible, to also start investing in ensuring that persons with disabilities and deaf persons have access to build their digital skills, their digital literacy, so that they are not left behind in this technology-enabled environment. So again, thank you so much for those remarks. I'm going to do a quick check to see if our third panelist, Lizzie, has joined, but I think not yet. So let's move to the Q&A section, and when Lizzie is able to join us, we will go to her for her remarks as well. So we've already received a lot of good questions in the Q&A box. And again, I encourage the audience to continue to send your questions there. And what I'll do is merge some of the questions together, some which have some common themes. And so let me start with 2 questions. The first really looks at, we have a few questions focusing on ensuring that people and children with intellectual disabilities also have equitable opportunities for inclusive education. And so Fred and Ronald, I invite you to give us your comments on thinking about how we can ensure that people with intellectual disabilities also have equal access to the technologies that they need. The second question, and I think, Ronald, it really follows on what you said. There are some questions that we've received, again, about ensuring that deaf people have, how to ensure that deaf people who've been left out have a continuity of education. So we aren't necessarily only thinking about primary education or secondary education, but ensuring that there is a continuity of education that allows them to transition into productive pathways later. So Fred, if you would like to start first.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I think that's a really important a question, because of all the different populations of children or persons with disabilities, those with intellectual disabilities end up being quite marginalized, I should say. But to ensure that they are able to access quality education, it is important to look at curriculum provisions, so that whoever is providing the education is able to look at curriculum differentiation, but begin by assessing the specific needs, abilities of the individual learner, so that an individualized education plan can be provided to meet the learning needs. And the range of technologies, assistive technologies that can support learners with intellectual disability so wide, especially after having established the specific learning needs. Because this could range from everyday chores, learning everyday chores, technology to remind them of what they need to do as they prepare to face the day or in the classroom, and technology that will make a learning very stimulating and interesting, will be able to capture and attract and retain their attention, especially after being broken down. I believe that with the right approach, that is beginning by establishing the specific needs that will inform the appropriate technology, it is very possible to include learners with intellectual disabilities in the learning process, so they're also able to access at the level they might find themselves in. I also wish to share Kenya's example, where the curriculum has been differentiated. There is a stage-based curriculum, and for this such that it focuses on the things that they need to learn, and how best to move on or to transit to other levels after accomplishing tasks that have been set. So is my
Fred, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I apologize for cutting you short, but in the interest of time, I also wanted to ask Ronald to come in and respond to these initial questions. I am very happy to say that Lizzie has joined us. So Ronald, after you provide some reflections on the questions, we will go over to Lizzie for her remarks. And then if time permits, I would like to throw one more question to the panel. So Ronald, if you had any reflections on the initial questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, most of what I could say, my colleagues already said, but I'm going to emphasize two main things. First is accessibility. Accessibility in terms of being able to have the gadgets, the required gadgets that our colleagues with intellectual disability need to use. In Africa, the biggest challenge is access. So apart from that access, then we look at the content. Because our colleagues with intellectual disabilities need access to content which is easier to read. So when we really sensitize the designers of these different softwares and content, they needed to design when having the picture of the end user of the content that they develop, to make sure that the content is in easy to read formats, which would be accessible for people with intellectual disability. We may not achieve this overnight, and everyone, all of us, were taken by surprise by COVID-19, but it is not late. We need to build back better, like we say, to make sure that we include everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ronald. My warm welcome to Lizzie as well, to the panel. And sorry, Lizzie, are you saying you are unable to hear? Or your interpreter is unable to hear us?
Joe, can you put on your microphone, please, and interpret for Lizzie? Can you speak what Lizzie is saying?
Yes, I can. Lizzie can see me well, and I can be able to see her well, and then I can be able to voice for her.
Can you repeat that?
Lizzie, can you see me well?
Yeah, I know.
All right, then I can be able to voice if you can hear me well.
Thank you, Lizzie. So is it okay to start with the question? Thank you so much. Lizzie, the question to you, actually before that, again, just a request to the audience, please mute if you're not speaking, so we can ensure that the interpreter gets good audio as well. All right, Lizzie, the question to you is, are education institutions equipped for hybrid learning? And what equipment and support is needed? And how do we ensure students with disabilities are included as we move forward with hybrid learning? Over to you, Lizzie.
Internet is the biggest challenge that you will find that most of the learners there at home are having. Connectivity is one of the biggest challenges, because if you do not have internet at the place you live, you're not connected. So looking at the different homes, you'll find that they're actually just there at home and they are not included in the learning. So I do think that connectivity in the different places is first what is needed. All right, thank you. most of the learners who actually now would suffer if they are either struggling at home or at different places. Because they don't have even the devices. You'll find that they do not have the laptops, if it's a laptop or if it's a smartphone or something. And this is a problem. It becomes hard for them. So I think it starts that we need to look at how do we have Wi-Fi accessible in different or closer regions. So there at the family, how do we make it easy that even at the nearest places, we can have such connectivity? This is how we can be able to help. So looking at laptops, things like laptops, they are needed. They are needed. But we are looking at, they are really expensive. So how many families can actually be able to afford it? So it becomes very difficult for the learners with disabilities. And now when we add out also the challenge of the connectivity, so when you join all of them now, so you'll find that now it now becomes nearly an impossible. COVID-19 pandemic, and when it happened and there was lockdown everywhere, and now we all had to stay at home. So for those who are maybe able to, well, let's say the deaf people, when we are trying now maybe even to follow anything on the TV, you'll find that most of them don't have the interpreter. I'm sorry, I'm struggling to see. The lighting is a bit of a challenge. I'm struggling to see. The lighting is really a challenge.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. If you do not mind me interrupting. Of time, what I'd like to do is move ahead with a few more questions, and I'll start with Lizzie to give those responses. The first, again, Lizzie, first of all, I do want to thank you for just giving us all a reality check that to the extent that we speak about the use of digital technology, that's not really possible when the core infrastructure is also lacking, including access to internet connectivity in the homes of people, access to smart devices, to laptops, to computing devices, just not just in urban areas, but rural areas as well, focusing on the affordability. So just investing in the core infrastructure is crucially important. There are a few questions which I feel really align well also with some of the remarks Lizzie has made. And again, I'd like to throw two out to the panel. One focuses on the role of parents and how how can we continue to equip parents and give them the resources that they need to really support their children with disabilities? The second question actually is around affordability. And over here, I'll expand it a bit to think about the service delivery system. So we have a question about how you assess for the needs of children with disabilities for access to assistive devices. We also have questions around affordability. So if the panelists could think a bit about the service delivery system. We are running out of time, so I'm requesting panelists to keep your remarks to about 2.5 minutes. Lizzie, if we may start with you.
Can Deepti repeat the question for Lizzie, please?
Sure. So I posed 2 questions. One is how we can support parents of children with disabilities and really ensure that they have the supports and knowledge needed to assist their children. And the second question is around investments in the service delivery system. So I'm pulling together 2 questions, one on affordability of assistive technology, but the second on assessment of assistive technology. And you all don't have to answer all the questions. You may pick what makes more sense for you. Thank you.
And Joe, can you ask Lizzie to come closer to the camera so we can see her?
I have the parents need to be empowered. So for the parents, it is important that for the parents to look at ways that we can be able to work together to help them or empower them. The parents also need to accept
Thank you so much, Lizzie. Fred, if I may request you to come in and give us your responses in maybe 1.5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think want to talk to the issue of empowerment of parents so that they get actively involved in the education of their children. I think something that needs to be done is getting parents involved right from the beginning. It would be important to sensitize them so that they have a clear understanding of the needs of their children. Because sometimes they may be called upon to purchase specific devices. They may be called upon to provide an appropriate environment at home and to inspire and encourage their children. So I think institutions of learning should get the parents involved by including them during open days or parents' days so that they are also aware of what's happening in the school. They need to learn things like sign language, and braille, the use of technology so that they're able to support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fred. Ronald, if I may invite you now to give us your remarks.
Thank you so much. In addition to what my colleagues just said, I think also we need to increase advocacy and to sensitize all our governments in Africa and non-state actors to make sure that persons with disabilities, children with disabilities are a priority. Ironically, during the emergencies that came up as a result of COVID-19, many times persons with disability were forgotten. They came as an afterthought, yet they are the most vulnerable group. So we needed to prioritize them, not to just think about them after being reminded. We need to provide them with the gadgets. They would be the first people to think about in terms of the education so that relevant gadget, digital devices are provided and assistive softwares. So we need to think about, to look at them as a first priority other than an afterthought. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ronald. We are almost at time for our session, and there are some amazing sessions to come. So it is really difficult to try and summarize just the wonderful, wonderful insights that were offered to us today. But let me try to highlight some of the important issues that came up. And I do want to apologize. I know there were audience members who were still sending questions, and you know, maybe we can try and get back to you on any specific questions later if possible. So just in wrapping up, some of the things that I think really jumped out to me from the entire panel was to think about the spectrum of disabilities, right? Think and ensure that children across the spectrum of disabilities have equal and equitable opportunities for education, even when delivered through technology. Just thinking about the spectrum of disabilities, also following from that, it's really important for us to think about the wide variety of technology that is available from low tech and high tech. I think all of the panelists really underscored the need to invest in the different components of our ecosystem, right? Starting from sometimes the core infrastructure, ensuring internet access, internet connectivity, just access and affordability of the devices, but then also investing in the learning materials that we are preparing, ensuring that the content itself is accessible, and very, very importantly, advocating for and building the knowledge and capacity of all of the different human stakeholders involved, right? Governments and policymakers, teachers, organizations of persons with disabilities, and very importantly, parents, caregivers, and children with disabilities themselves. So again, encouraging all of you as we work together on ensuring inclusive education, that let's think about all of these different aspects of the system and collectively ensure that we can continue to address the gaps. Thank you so much.